of all, good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to call everyone here to discuss the findings of the Rhode Island State Police assessment of the Cranston Police Department. First, I want to take a moment to thank Colonel Stephen O'Donnell, Lieutenant Colonel Barry, and Captain Moynihan for their leadership and guidance of the Cranston Police Department during those difficult times. This report has provided me with invaluable insight into some serious problems that existed prior to significant changes that I made last year that included the hiring of Colonel Michael Winquist, who is the former second in command of the Rhode Island State Police, and as well as the first time in the history of the Cranston Police Department that we've gone outside for our colonel. Second, I want to apologize. Apologize to the residents of Cranston. I recognize I'm not perfect, but the measure of a man is not the mistake he's made in the past, but how he grows from them. And I'm growing, and I will continue to do so. Leadership starts at the top, and as chief executive of this great city, I'm the one who is ultimately accountable for all departments, for all employees, and for all matters relating to the city. Hindsight is always 20/20. And after reading the report, I wish some things were done differently. I wish I had done a better job of balancing delegation with hands-on action. And yes, I was too trusting of Colonel Palumbo. While we can't turn back the clock on previous actions, we can learn and grow from them. It can be hard for anyone to look in the mirror, but it's times like these that it has to be done. The stakes are far too high to leave this department in turmoil and ignore the problems that existed. Instead, I decided to bring in the state police and have them conduct that top-to-bottom review of the department. And it was a decision that I very well knew could result in criticisms of me. However, I knew it was the right thing to do for the taxpayers of Cranston. And there's no doubt that this report presents an opportunity for both myself and the entire Cranston Police Department to continue to fix the problems from the past, as well as to work to restore the credibility for the future. And it's my intention today to sit before you all and speak honestly and openly regarding what is discussed within the assessment report. There are criticisms of me, my leadership style, and my relationships with certain people. I'm here to tell you that as mayor and the head of public safety, I take this responsibility very seriously, and I'm ultimately accountable for the actions of all officers. As mayor, I have to trust my directors and make my decisions based on the information they provide to me. I placed that trust in Colonel Palumbo and later found out that he had let me down as I reviewed this report. Seeing the events as outlined in the assessment, I realized that he misled me and in doing so jeopardized the credibility of the entire department. When much of this information came to the forefront, I did take decisive action, however. I was the one that placed Colonel Palumbo on administrative leave. I was the one that called the Rhode Island State Police in. I was the one that asked for that assessment, a top-to-bottom assessment of what was going on in that police department. And for the first time in the city's history, I was the one that appointed a chief from outside of the department who was the number 2 in the state police. Now, one topic that the report deals with extensively is the settlement agreement with, that the city reached with Captain Antonucci. Actions have consequences, and the actions that Captain Antonucci took had severe consequences. Let me be clear. The ticketing incident was not acceptable. And under no circumstances did I attempt to politicize this issue. With any personnel matter, without exception, in any department, I always try to find the most cost-effective way to put those matters before me to a close, thus saving the Cranston taxpayers as much money as possible. In April of 2014, I accepted the recommendation of then Acting Colonel Barry to seek the termination of Captain Antonucci. This course of action was met with great resistance on Captain Antonucci's part. It led to 3 separate lawsuits filed against the city on top of that Bill of Rights action. By state law, everyone knows or heard of that law enforcement officer's Bill of Rights, more commonly referred to as LIABOR. I was forced to allow Captain Antonucci to remain on paid leave. As we've seen, during that time, we incurred legal bills costing the taxpayers over $150,000, even before one witness had taken the stand at that Bill of Rights hearing. And according to our legal counsel, Attorney Regasta, this was an unprecedented case. There was a great deal of uncertainty as to the outcome. And as we've seen, based on past Bill of Rights cases, there's no telling what the ultimate sanction might be, if any at all. I was faced with the decision to wait for the Bill of Rights process to finish and unfold, which could end unpredictably, or seek a definite resolution. With no legal precedent before us, in my opinion, this was simply too high of a risk for the taxpayers of Cranston. Thus, I sought to find a resolution. And as the litigation continued, we ended up in the state Supreme Court, and through Supreme Court mediation, Colonel Winquist and I agreed upon a resolution to the matter in June of 2015, ultimately. And some have even said, you must regret the decision to bring in the state police. And I want to let anyone who feels this way know this isn't the case. This assessment has provided me with valuable information that myself, Colonel Winquist, and the department will use to learn and grow from. One thing is for certain, I'm pleased the department has its first ever chief from outside the city. Colonel Winquist is working diligently to put aside the problems of the past, boost morale, and reunite the faction department. Reunite that so-called A-Team, B-Team that had been in existence for generations. And someday, when I will eventually leave office, I can leave knowing that I played an instrumental role in reforming the divisive culture of the Cranston Police Department that existed for generations, and putting in place a leader that's willing to act honestly and fairly in the best interest of the residents of Cranston. I now believe that turning around the department will become a part of my legacy. At the end of the day, I'm the one who is accountable for the operation of the city, and I will not let these incidents that are contained in the assessment report tarnish the reputation of the men and women of the Cranston Police Department. Since I've hired Colonel Winquist, the department is running more smoothly. The employees, the men and women, have a better morale. And what's important is there is a clear chain of command now. And I have the utmost confidence that Colonel Winquist will bring this department to new heights. Colonel Winquist and I are working together and will continue to work together to implement the recommendations as advised in the report and to continue to move the department forward. I promise to the residents of the great city of Cranston that our police department will be another success story coming out of Cranston, just like the successes that we've seen from the tax freezes, increased bond ratings, pension reform, economic development, and job growth that we've experienced during my administration. So members of the press, floor is yours. I'll take your questions.
So you're not going to resign?
I'm absolutely not going to resign. I love this job as mayor. You guys know that. Take a look at all the successes that we've done during my 7 years now, 3 terms as mayor. The job growth, 1,400 jobs, the pension reform that we were able to achieve, the 401ks, balancing the budget from the deficits that we inherited from not only former Mayor Napolitano, but those severe cuts. We've come a long way. Take a look at just visually, Chapel View, Garden City. We're growing, and I'm not going to let this one incident from one department, not necessarily one incident, one department and all the incidents that are outlined in the assessment tarnish that reputation. I'm going to learn and grow from it.
This assessment looks at a number of incidents.
Guys, I'm sorry. Look, I'll answer. I know, I will. Can I, one at a time, please? I'm going to sit here and take everyone's questions, okay? Greg?
Mayor, you said you always look for the most cost-effective outlet from a dilemma. The City Council and the State Police report both said that you missed a gigantic opportunity in the Padalano case when Penza, his lawyer, and Padalano came to you, revealed what the issues were, and that, according to the State Police, you took no action whatsoever. And as a result, the bill has skyrocketed since.
Here's why I didn't, take that, so-called offer that was, because I didn't feel that the taxpayers of Cranston were legally responsible for Captain Padalano's, essentially, legal bills. That's a function of his policing. In fact, he has a separate legal action against his union for those bills. To this day, I still don't feel that, taxpayers of Cranston should be footing his legal bill.
Mayor, the report basically says that you deceived voters by acting to delay revelations about the problems in the police department. What do you say about that?
I've always acted with the best interest of the voters, not even just voters, of Cranston residents at heart. And it wasn't any type of delay that I was trying to put out there.
Wasn't that the net effect, though, that we didn't get a more thorough vetting of this information until just this Monday?
I don't believe so. As soon as I found out that the report, that assessment was ready, I drove up there myself to try to get it. But I had to be cautious too, Ian, because in that report, as you all said, there's confidential medical information that we had to, take into consideration. The city's also involved in a couple of lawsuits. We had some very delicate balance that we had to find out the appropriate and try. That's why I sought an advisory opinion from the Attorney General's office to try to get some guidance so that, my intent was always to try to make that report public, but I want to do it in the right way because we have different considerations in releasing the report, personnel information.
Just a real quick follow-up. If this information that's public now had been public to voters at the time of last year's Republican primary, would the results have been different?
I can't speculate as to that, Ian. All I can tell you is, upon receiving the report and taking a look at the assessment as an overall, I've learned a lot, and hindsight is always 20/20. And that's why I'm sitting here today, with an apology to the taxpayers of Cranston, to the residents of Cranston, about what's been going on. Because it's a delicate balance in that role that I sit as not only mayor, but also public safety commissioner. Because I am overseeing the police department and the fire department. And this is what happens routinely in a lot of other municipalities where you have that dual role as mayor. And I've got to try to make sure that I have that right delicate balance of trusting the people that I put into place in these departments, but acting where it's appropriate to act. And that assessment provided a lot of eye-opening areas for me.
Mayor Fung, why did you publicly denounce the behavior of Captain Antonucci and then effectively work behind the scenes to try to get him reinstated, and also without any kind of, demotion?
Well, on the Captain Antonucci matter, as I said, when I provide my statement, I've always tried to look for what's out in the best interest, financial interest of the taxpayers of Cranston. Anyone that kind of has dealt with me has I think a little bit differently, and I'm always looking out for that financial interest. And as it's proven in the case, what ended up happening was there was outside lawsuits that were brought by Captain Antonucci on top of that Bill of Rights hearing. And we ultimately ended up spending over $150,000 in legal expenses before a single witness had even been in the box in that Bill of Rights hearing. On top of that, there's always uncertainty, and we've seen that, I think, in the history, not necessarily just strictly the Cranston, but in any department where Bill of Rights hearings happen. Sometimes people have, gotten what I term slaps on the wrist for, the behaviors that was before them. And, lastly, even Attorney Ragasta, who, represented the city, had said publicly that there were some novel issues that were brought up in this case. So for me, it was more about trying to provide some finality, stability to the department, move forward. As I look back, one of the things I probably should have done was speak more with Colonel Winquist to get his, buy-in at the outset. And I recognize that now because I did have, as the report indicated, a disagreement with the colonel about that resolution.
Did you purposely wait until after the election to tell the state police that you were trying to reinstate Antonucci?
I did not purposely wait on that front. In fact,
So
if
Colonel
you take...
O'Donnell is wrong?
No, I didn't purposely. What I can tell you is I didn't purposely wait. It wasn't about politics. It was about moving and getting finality to the situation, to a matter that I thought was going to continue on. And as the facts kind of appeared, it was costing the taxpayers significant dollars moving forward.
And what did you mean when you told Colonel O'Donnell and Winquist you thought they were trying to blow you up?
Well, here's the thing. When I had that, disagreement with the Colonel Winquist, that is, he had just come on board. I didn't have too much dealings with him in the past, because when I was a prosecutor, I didn't have too many cases with him. I didn't have that relationship with him. We were trying to get to know each other. As people know, I have strong feelings, and he obviously did too. He disagreed with the recommendation that I was trying to put forward to resolve the matter, and it got heated. And, I used a poor choice of words, in that discussion, with him, and, looking back, it was just a heated exchange.
And you said O'Donnell is political, unlike Winquist. What did you mean by that?
And that's what I'm saying. It was just a heated exchange, and I regret a lot of the words that I used, but what I learned now is, I was passionate, he's passionate about the department. What I should have done back then was really sit down with him to get his buy-in about what the appropriate resolution would have been acceptable for him. Because as you saw, after that exchange, I listened to him. I took into consideration some of the stuff that you read about in the report. And I thought long and hard about the department, because my overall goal has always been to do what's right for that department and the taxpayers of Cranston. And I just felt, and this is maybe why I was a little bit, angered, because I felt that, he wasn't listening to where I was coming from about the financial impact. And maybe that's why I just got, angry and just said what I said.
Mayor, you're an astute fellow. Did you not recognize there was an A team and a B team in the police department?
I had heard,
Go ahead.
no, look, I had heard rumors about this so-called A team, B team going on in Cranston for generations. But it's rumors. Until you actually see what's going on.
You didn't see?
It took me a while. And this assessment is also a big eye-opener for me, too, because when you're governing and leading, and I take responsibility for that, because especially with this police department, I sit in that role as public safety commissioner. So all the officers fall under, my purview.
Right.
But you have to trust the people that you put into place to provide you with the accurate information about what's going on. And when you take a look at the report, you have the benefit now of having all of those different issues coming into play at one time, because it didn't happen all at the same time,
So
too.
what do you think now that you look at it?
Think about what, though?
The divisiveness within the police department.
No,
I
certainly.
mean, did you play it to your advantage?
I did
at
not
any
play.
stage?
I did not play anything to my advantage. I can tell you that any decision that I've made within that police department as mayor of the city of Cranston, any other department, and any personnel matters, has always with the best interest of the taxpayers of Cranston at heart.
Mayor, why did things have to get so bad that it got to a point where this ticket scandal occurred? Police officers felt they could engage in what looks like very inappropriate behavior before it came on your radar screen to try and before it came on the radar screen to try and make improvements to the department.
Well, I think that's when it came to a head, Ian, but I had some suspicions, and this is where it gets a little bit, difficult too, because that's why I asked for the assessment from the state police, and asked them to come in to just give me a true, indication of what's going on. Because what I had started seeing before was, an uptick in grievances. Different types of grievances, stress grievances, everything else. We had the lawsuits, but it wasn't until you start, piecing a lot of that together as a whole that you start recognizing it. And as I look back, it's trying to, as a leader, it's trying to provide that delicate balance of putting enough trust in the people that you put into place and finding when you should act. And as I look back, maybe I should have acted more. But it came to a culmination with that, and that's why I asked the state police, for that assessment.
Mayor, you said you put too much trust in Colonel Colombo. The state police report indicates that you were aware, though, of some of these behaviors, including but not limited to Colombo's surveillance of other police officers and civilians. Why did you allow that to happen?
Well, there was a lot of, incidents as you take a look at the report that happened. But like I said before, it happened in different periods of time. That net synergy, incident that happened, it came on my radar because I got that phone call from the vice president, and so did my director of administration, who was actually overseeing that transition from getting those security codes to the police department. And when I got that call, as soon as I found out what had happened, I put a stop to it. Now, I was the one that, after having that happen, having that phone call from the vice president, was very concerned because I didn't want any officer treating any resident, regardless of whether you live in Cranston or not, that way. And I did have, a conversation where I blasted Colonel Palumbo about that. But here's where it's a little bit different, too, in the public sector. It's not a lot of, like in the private sector, at will. The police chief is a classified position in Cranston, and so isn't our fire chief. So it's a little different position, and, I did take action at that point in time. Maybe I should have done more. Maybe it should have been a bigger signal. But as I saw, and I think it was Parker, your report last night on the Nets Energy thing, the person that I spoke to was satisfied with how we handled it. Because what he just wanted was the situation to stop, particularly with how he was treated, and, that's what ultimately happened.
When did this incident happen? When did you get the call from the vice president?
I don't remember the specific year that it happened. One thing I do remember, I got the phone call on Valentine's Day.
Okay.
Because it just rings on my bell because I was on my way to dinner that night and I got the phone call. That's why I remember that incident so severely. And I contacted my director of administration at that time, Jerry Cordy, who had been dealing with this, and told him to get in touch with the colonel and to cut this out.
But the colonel wasn't on paid administrative leave at that
Not at
point?
that time.
Not
No,
yet.
not at that point.
Should you have disciplined the colonel, Mayor? Should you have disciplined the colonel?
I think I probably should have taken, looking back now, more action than just blasting them. Yeah, and this is where it's tough, because in the public sector, there's that continuum of discipline that is a little bit different. I treated that more as a verbal reprimand with him. In hindsight, maybe I should have taken more action with him then. Maybe that should have been a bigger indicator that there's more going on. And this, now that I have the assessment and take a look at everything together, the pieces fit, but then you're just taking a look at things. I don't have time. To Scott, I know Dan had his hands up, and then I'll get to you, Scott.
Mayor, I know you've apologized to the taxpayers. Based
Yes.
on what you've read and based on what you say about being misled by Colonel Colombo, do you
Mhm.
believe anyone in the department deserves an apology? Have you apologized to any members of the department?
No, I haven't taken that step yet, but I think now the biggest step that we took to address a lot of these issues, and these were issues that had been in the past, was having Colonel Winquist come in 9 months ago now. He's been on the job for 9 months. What I've seen so far is a lot of the morale improve. There's that clearer chain of command that's going on. They're making arrests as we're seeing. They're doing a lot of good work. And I think for me, that's what's important now. But, after taking a look at the assessment, I apologize. I really do to, all the residents, to the department. Maybe I should have gotten involved a lot, quicker. But I've got to continue to grow as a person and find that right balance.
Mayor,
No,
what
I'm
will
sorry,
you-
Ken, before you...
Quick question.
Sure.
During the time of this investigation, you were running for governor. Obviously, you were moving your feet all around the state, doing other things. What impact do you think your very active campaign for governor had on this entire continuum of problems in the police department? I mean, the obvious question is, look, the guy's out running for governor, and he probably should have been paying more attention to what's going on in his own house.
Yeah. I don't know, Scott, and I'm being honest with you. I'm not sure, but what I can tell you is that process and how I've treated that department or any department wasn't with any political bent or political interest. So, people can speculate. I'll have to leave that to the voters and people to judge, what impact, if any, it played. But what I do know is I took those actions, even during the run for governor, to call in the state police. And I asked them for that report, even knowing it might be critical of some of the actions that I've taken. I'm sorry, go ahead, Paul.
Mayor, a big portion of the report focuses in on Matthew Josephson and these trumped-up charges, essentially, disciplinary charges that were brought up against him by the former chief. In his own admission that 3 out of the 7 that were levied against him shouldn't even have been on there. To this day, he is still a patrolman. He was demoted from the sergeant's position. The report says you haven't acted on that. What is your plan with Matthew Josephson?
That's a little bit of a complicated situation, Parker, and here's why. First of all, let me just take a step back. When then Sergeant Josephson accepted the motion, from what I'm told, he not only had a union attorney, but his also personal attorney that was advising him at that time, that he signed the agreement. And, reading in hindsight what's going on, I understand, overall what transpired. But why I say it's complicated is this. I don't have the unilateral authority just to create a sergeant's position. I can't just do that as mayor. And even if I were to go to the council, try to create that sergeant's position, extra sergeant's position, you've got a sergeant's list in place. And to be fair, I don't know if this, if Officer Josephson retook that test or not. I know I had a conversation with the Colonel Winquist, that is, a few months ago, that I said I would allow him to take that test. So I don't know where he stands on that. But it presents a whole host of complicated potential grievance type issues, because if there is a list in place, another position opens up, you could have those members that are on that list that took the test grievance saying, I should be entitled. So it's not an easy just, I'm going to put them back.
On a related note, the report raises questions about your support for a disability pension for Captain Dodd, despite how there was not final information on his health status. It suggests there was something unusual about that. What's your explanation of that?
First of all, it wasn't anything unusual, and I just got to be careful with all this, because it does, that situation does involve disability, and I can't talk about medical information specifically, so I'm just going to watch what I say. But what I will say is this. First off, that decision about, whether or not the captain qualified, for the disability pension was done with legal advice. Attorney Regasta and another outside attorney. They provide, because it was a very delicate situation that involved whether the officer was fit for duty once he hit a certain age in accordance with our ordinance. And because of that medical information that we had, and the attorneys reviewed it, it came to the conclusion that he was entitled, conclusively presumed, that he was disabled. And that's why we moved, based upon that legal advice, to put him out on that disability pension.
He
And we
said,
went-
but it says in the report there was actually no final medical judgment that he was permanently disabled. That's the point. They said
That's-
it. So the report is wrong?
I would disagree, because
Have you read the full report?
yes, I have
You
read
have.
it fully.
So-
But here's where, on that report, and this is, I just gotta be careful, because this is a delicate balance, because there's a procedure that we have to follow when you're talking about the disability, someone going out on a disability. And he was part of our local pension plan. Under that disability provision, you need 2 doctors to say, that your condition meets X and that you're disabled. But it's also an interplay under our contract, because under our contract is language that certain types of disabilities are presumptively, conclusively presumed to be a disability. And that's the situation that we had to interplay, and why we sought outside legal advice. We had 2 attorneys, Attorney Regasta and another attorney, providing us with advice as to which direction we were going, and we made the decision based upon that advice and guidance.
But Dodd himself was concerned that you were going through a process that was not going to leave him legally entitled to that pension. I mean, why were you in more of a rush than the person who was going to get a pension to get that done and then have Antonucci get the captainship?
I don't think we were in a rush, though, because we already had satisfied by getting the 2 medical opinions. There was the 2 reports that said X. I can't get into the specifics, that said X, that met the criteria under the ordinance. And I know that we didn't get that 3rd report, but all you needed was 2 out of the 3 under the ordinance. So
Did you know Antonucci would be the beneficiary when you were going through that process?
I know that he was number 1 on the list, but he wasn't the only promotion, if I remember this whole thing correctly back then. There was several other promotions that had occurred during that time, too.
But Antonucci got where Dodd's captain slot when Dodd
Yes,
won.
yes.
And did you know that would happen once you gave Dodd the disability pension?
I knew he was number 1 on the list, and as soon as that had happened, yes, the captain was, but in fairness to that, it wasn't just him. There were other promotions that were also going to happen, too. I know the report, says that he was the main, but there were other promotions that were going to happen also.
What conversations did you have with Antonucci during the Dodd pension process?
None.
None?
I can tell you right now, I was not necessarily involved in that process. In fact, when the state police took a look at it, I went through my emails. I only had, I think, a few emails, even as part of, a thick file that we turned over to these guys. Ultimately, it's my call, based upon the legal advice and direction that we go as an administration, and we put him forward with that disability pension. But we did it based upon, the legal guidance that we provided, Ted.
Mayor, were you still,
were you treated fairly by the state police during this whole process, do you think?
Yeah, look, I believe so.
You and your administration?
I asked for them to come in, and they did a great job holding the department together during that time period until I was able to get I'm sorry. Sorry, Matt. I was able to get a new chief in place, and, they, put in certainly a lot of time and effort to help out the department.
How about in the way the police report was released by Colonel O'Donnell before you could get the clearance from the Attorney General? Do you feel there was some sort of a backdoor by the Colonel to get this information out?
I can't
Is he
speak.
upset by that?
I can't speak for the Colonel. I have a different consideration because of, the position I sit in as mayor, and looking at it for the residents of Cranston, because of the legal considerations of the ongoing suit, the medical stuff, and that's why I'm being real cautious on what I talk about that Dodd disability. So I wanted to get the advisory opinion about what we should do, what can be made public, what can't be, just to get that comfort and guidance, because I don't want to trip it up. But it was always my intent to make that report public.
Do you think the city's been put at further legal risk for lawsuits after the release of this, the way it was done?
I'm not going to speculate and guess on that, Matt. The bottom line is this: those lawsuits are, pending, and I can't get into that.
Is the report correct to say that actions by you and your administration increase the city's liability for litigation?
I would disagree in a sense that, you know, the report, that assessment, you know, provided a grand context of everything that's going on within the police department over a period of time. And, you know, the individual suits that are ongoing are going to have to stand on their merits, you know, going forward about the individual facts that happened as it relates to, you know, those individuals that have sued the city.
How many suits are there in total related to the police department and coinciding with your tenure as mayor?
I can't tell you that.
don't know
I'm not sure, because what I can tell you is, you know, at least as far as Captain Antonucci in the Bill of Rights, that was 3 separate suits that he brought against the city. There is the Captain Padalano, you know, lawsuit. There is the Captain Giebolt lawsuit that's mentioned in the case, but there might be some small, I don't know the total
Mayor,
numbers.
what conversations did you have with Antonucci while you were trying to get him reinstated?
Yeah. I spoke with him, and I said that I would try to get him back to the department to try to resolve this matter. In hindsight, I should have, like I said before, talked to Colonel Winquist first and got his input. You know, and that's what led to that disagreement that we had that was noted in like November, December timeframe. Ultimately, you know, we did reach a conclusion where both the colonel and the administration were able to resolve. In June, I think was the date, June 2015, the case, you know, as it was winding its way in the Supreme Court through that mediation process.
He was aware you were trying to reinstate him?
The colonel was?
Yeah.
Colonel Winquist? Yeah.
Did you make some kind of agreement?
No, like I said, I told Captain Antonucci that I would try to, you know, bring him back. And, you know, we were in that discussion phase. Obviously, nothing was ever finalized. And when the Colonel Winquist, that is, and I had that, you know, heated back and forth, there's no denying that, you know, we had a heated back and forth because, you know, I felt, like I said before, that, you know, he wasn't taking what I was saying, you know, seriously, or at least that's how I felt. But ultimately, we've gotten past a lot of that. We're working a lot closely together. You know, I know he's having, you know, a lot more, you know, meetings with my direct administration, and I'll sit in on some of those meetings to find out what's going on. He's communicating a lot more. Ultimately, we're working, you know, together a lot closely.
What's been the impact of this report on your relationship with the police department? How would you characterize your relationships with the rank and file, with the brass, and can you continue to serve? I mean, you are the public safety commissioner. Do they have confidence in you?
One thing I do know, that morale is up, and I think it also helps with the chain of command too. And you know, that's all I can say right now. I don't know, you know, how the individual officers feel about me. You know, all I can tell them is, you know, I'm learning from my experience as I've read through the assessment of what's going on. You know, I'm probably going to personally change my style a little bit too, because, you know, I've always had an open door policy with, you know, whether it's the police department or any other department, with the employees. And, you know, now taking a step back, I've got to trust, you know, Colonel Winquist and follow that chain of command. So there's individual things that I'm learning about, putting into place. And I think, you know, when I appeared in front of the city council the other night talking about the letter, one of the things that I, you know, will consider too is whether or not it's feasible or, you know, wise to consider a public safety commissioner for the city of Cranston.
Outside of the mayor.
Outside of the mayor. Because right now, I hold that function, and I take it seriously. I take, you know, everything that I do seriously as mayor, but also particularly overseeing public safety. And I'll take a look at it. And because right now, the only city that I'm aware of in Rhode Island that has it is Providence. And I'll just have to see whether, you know, we should go that way, because our city has changed.
Mayor, do you still harbor political aspirations for higher office, and do you think that this will hurt your chances in that regard?
I'll leave it for the, you know, voters to decide. Now, first of all I can tell you is, I love this job as mayor of the city of Cranston. I'm proud of a lot of the accomplishments that we've done, all the accomplishments I talked about. And, we'll see what the voters ultimately decide about, my future.
Will you
plan
seek
to run
re-election
again?
next year?
Right now, all I can tell you, Ted, is I love this job.
So you have not decided whether to seek re-election next year?
I'm almost confident that I will be, back as mayor.
Mayor,
So,
what do you say to taxpayers? You talked about wrapping up the Antonucci thing as a result of
Mhm.
trying to save money. What would you say to a taxpayer who says, well, if taxpayers and citizens can use as pawns in some sort of a political collective bargaining game, all I have to do for the mayor is just make it difficult for him to fire me, make it expensive, and I keep my job. I mean, shouldn't a guy lose his job for certain things that they do, like using citizens, ordering a ticket blitz on citizens, in his capacity as a commander in the police force?
Matt, one of the things that, sitting in this position as mayor, you've got to make a lot of decisive actions. Sometimes you're going to get criticized, as I've been criticized right now in this assessment report, for not taking enough action in certain instances. And I've got to find that right balance of what to do. And I think my track record over the past 7 years has shown is I've not been afraid to take the decisive actions when there's been wrongdoing, whether it's within the police department or even with other employees in the city of Cranston. I'm always going to do what's right for the taxpayers of Cranston, especially from a financial side. This is where I've always
But
taken a
in
look
this
at a lot of
case,
stuff.
And in this case, citizens were involved in a political back and forth between the police union and some council people. I mean,
Mhm.
to me, that is a serious charge for a law enforcement officer who's in charge of protecting people's rights and enforcing laws to use that to a political advantage. That is something, do you think that that's something that a police officer should be able to keep his job over?
Well, and that's why I said, when I opened this up, that I took that, ticket incident very seriously, and that there are severe consequences. And the Colonel Winquist and I was able to finally reach a resolution that he was comfortable with going forward, that the administration was comfortable going forward with, so that, the captain ultimately, won't be coming back to the police department.
But to Matt's point, there
Mhm.
wouldn't have been severe consequences if you got your way. Your proposal was bring him back at the same rank last year, correct?
And Ted, this is where I should have, talked to my colonel ahead of time. And I'm learning through that process that, he was looking at things from, and we all saw the words, that we had back forth. He was looking at things from the department perspective. I sit back and a lot of times I don't just look at it from one department. I have to look at it from the entire city, all 80,000 residents, every single department, every employee decision. And that's why it got heated. He had strong opinions, I had strong opinions. Ultimately, we got together and found the right solution to move the department forward and move the city forward.
How would you describe your personal relationship over the years with Stephen Antonucci? It's clear in the report, Colonel, or the investigators think he was a political supporter of yours, his family was. Everyone I've spoken to is astonished by how much you put your political career in jeopardy to protect one guy who did a ticket blitz. I mean, why were you so focused on protecting Stephen Antonucci?
I wasn't focused on, and it's not a choice of choosing one individual over the taxpayers of Cranston. It's not that at all, Ted. I will always stand for what I think is right for the taxpayers of Cranston. And that incident with Captain Antonucci, I felt what was right was trying to put a final resolution, to that matter, particularly, with respect to what I saw as an attorney of some of the potential costs that could be, having a clock tick each, day with a lot of those separate lawsuits that were filed. In fact, a lot of it proved to be true. Over $150,000, worth of legal bills, and he hadn't put one witness in the box yet, Ted. That's where I was coming from. And as we heard from Attorney Ragasta, look, there were novel issues there. And as we saw, and I think it was even today's editorial, some of the different departments that are out there, you can't predict what a panel's going to do, what a court will do. And I was trying to seek some closure for the health department and move it forward.
Do you want the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights repealed?
I want it certainly changed, at least to the point where there's more deference given, and I think that editorial, that opinion piece today shows that there should be more weight and deference given to the recommendations that are put forward. There should be more of a transparent process because, as you guys know, and Parker, we had a little bit of a back and forth on this. I couldn't talk about a lot of this stuff because of that Bill of Rights. I was hamstrung a lot of that stuff, and I think that the taxpayers do deserve to know a little bit more, but I've got to be cautious because I sit in a different role as mayor, and I've got to listen to the advice of my council as to how I go forward.
Did the flaws in your management style that were presented in this report make you second guess or make you have a second look at some of the other departments that you manage? You start to think about the other parts of the city that maybe
Right now, and this is where, why I say I do love this job, because this has been one department. One department out of all the departments that I've managed. Well, there's 600 employees that are under my stewardship that we're having an issue. That's why I take pride in a lot of the stuff that I've done, the good work that we've done on behalf of the residents of Cranston. And I'm not going to let this, continue, to be a blight. And that's why I did call the state police to do this assessment, knowing that it could be critical of some of the decisions I played.
But did you learn anything in this assessment
Yes,
about your management
absolutely.
style that would translate to other parts of the city?
Yeah, and this is where, for me, I'm not sure other parts of the city, but I think management style, one of the things I learned is I just have to put a lot more trust and faith in the directors I have in there. I've got to learn personally to balance off, I think, overall, when I need to get involved and when I might be putting too much trust and reliance on the director. I haven't seen that come up in any of the other directors that are working with me right now. But also, in the past, if a director is, I've had issue with, I haven't been afraid to take action against those directors too, whether it's, again, writing them up, giving them a verbal, or whatever that, appropriate sanction might be.
Mayor, if you were trying to reinstate Antonucci to the benefit of taxpayers,
Mhm.
why didn't you publicize what you were doing to tell them, you had their backs?
Well, first of all, I didn't have the support of my colonel, and this is one of the things I learned. I should have talked to him first. I wasn't going to sit there and all of a sudden create this conflict publicly with my colonel, because I placed a lot of trust and confidence in him to do the right thing to lead the department. The last thing I want is, this public schism that's going on, which, look, it happened. We did have a disagreement, but we've moved on it. We're talking a lot more, and that's important. A lot of times, getting to know people that you put into place, having that working relationship, it takes time to build it, and we're building that, and we're moving the department forward. I think that's the important thing.
Do you dispute, though, that voters have a reason to feel misled? You were having big press conferences we all covered about we're going to come down on Antonucci, we're going to be tough on him, there's no place for this. And behind the scenes, you're trying to get a deal that would have reinstated him at his rank and everything else. I mean, do you see why people would find that misleading?
I see the perception that it creates, but all I can say is it wasn't the case. That wasn't in my mind, Ted, that this was anything political at all. It was.
You said in the report this is political. You told Winquist.
But in a different context.
What was the context?
Like I said, I had a disagreement with him. What I was frustrated with was the fact that I was looking at from the financial perspective. My my years of being a lawyer and seeing where this thing goes. Actually, even the past experience that I've had with the Bill of Rights, because I've had a couple of them even before this. So, on him that wouldn't benefit the department. I should have listened to him more at that point in time, but it got heated. And I said some words that I regret, but ultimately what I did and was work with him, took a lot more months later, work with him to try to reach a resolution that he was comfortable with, the administration was comfortable with, and the benefit of the taxpayers, and stop those costs. Because at that point in time, when we reached a resolution in June, we still hadn't started the hearing. We hadn't had a single witness yet. And it could have lasted for months, if not years. And we've seen that happen in other Bill of Rights.
Mayor, to dovetail off Ted's point, or part of Ted's point about perception, public perception, as you move forward, as we approach the potential of future runs, or whatever your ambitions may be, how do you address people in your own city who don't trust you, don't trust the administration, the term good old boy network, or something to that extent, appears, you know, we can talk about it in a humorous tone. It appears in a report issued by the Rhode Island State Police. That's how serious they take that phrasing. What do you say to people in the trust scam?
First of all, was that in the report? I don't remember seeing that. If it was, then.
A gripe from an underling about how it was a further display of the good old boy network and the way things have been run. And for people, again, who cling on to something like that, who have, there's a trust gap, they don't trust you. What do you say to those people?
Well, the voters are going to have to decide, you know, at the appropriate time. But all I can tell you is I'm proud of a lot of accomplishment we've done for the entire city. You know, those things that I highlighted. I'm proud of the fact that I put in a police chief for the first time from outside of the department that's not associated with either of this so-called A team, B team, and who knows, it might be even a C team. Because a lot of, from what I understand, a lot of this isn't just novel for Cranston. You know, but the bottom line is this: I take ownership of fixing a problem. I'm sitting here talking to not only all of you guys, but to the residents of Cranston to apologize and say, I'm going to do better. I will do better. And I have done a lot of good for the residents of Cranston overall, and this is one department where, you know, I've put my trust in Colonel Winquist to move it along, and we're seeing some of those benefits already with morale, clearer chain of command, and they're doing, you know, good work.
The ACLU
I'm
is
sorry,
very
Dan,
alarmed.
Dan
sorry,
has.
I didn't see it.
Just, members of the council have called on you to appear publicly and answer questions. Do you intend to do that? Is that something that's been requested of you already?
Sure. I'm not going to hide from anyone, Dan. I'm not afraid of, you know, what's contained in this assessment. It's a lot of lessons that I'm learning. I'm going to, you know, and this is the other thing, too. I asked Colonel Winquist, I provided him a copy of the assessment as soon as I got it. I forgot what day I provided to him. But, you know, my director of administration and I said, look, give us your thoughts and recommendations on where we're going to go. So I'm not hiding from anything, and, you know, I'm going to be open and transparent. I'll answer these questions to, you know, the residents of Cranston. You know, I've always held town halls. I'm sure they'll come up with questions about it, and I'll answer it to them too, just like I'm answering to you.
How about the issue the ACLU brought up today about surveillance being ordered on people, and even that getting covered up? Do you see that as just a thing Palumbo is doing, or are you concerned it's a broader, something they do regularly maybe in the police department?
That certainly was troubling, and that's why I acted. When I found out what happened, I got that phone call from the vice president. You know, I acted. I asked my director of administration to act. And, you know, when that happened, and as you saw from the report, I guess, you know, he got back and he pulled the guy back. But, and I told the colonel that that type of behavior isn't going to be tolerated and is not acceptable, because we're not going to do that to residents of Cranston or people outside of Cranston.
Mayor, this report accuses you and your office of political interference. Do you feel that it's a fair assessment? Was there any political interference on your part?
Well, those are some of the words that I strongly disagree with. First of all, that it was political, but most of all, that it was even interference. You know, as I said before, as mayor, and this is where, just like any other mayor in many cities and towns, you sit in that unique role also as public safety director, public safety commissioner, whatever you want to call it, and you're responsible for the police department and the fire department, and, you know, in some cases, depending on how charter, you know, any other areas of public safety. And I take those roles that I have as both mayor and public safety commissioner to heart. And I feel that it's my job, my responsibility, to make sure that, you know, I provide the right resources for whoever's sitting as a director in that position. But if, you know, something's going wrong, I need to act. And that's where, you know, this is where I'm a little at a crossroads myself, and that's why I asked for the colonel for advice. Because if you notice in the report, it said, you know, one of the recommendations was, well, don't interfere. But then in other parts, you know, in the report, inserted, oh, you need to get involved enough. So I got to learn to try to find that proper balance as to when's the right time to kind of get there, because, you know, for me that was a little conflicting message, because I'm trying to grow in my leadership style, provide that right active balance, but also trust in the directors that I put into place. I have to do that.
reading this report, is there anything that you do think that you did wrong, anything that you would change?
Like I said before, hindsight's always 20/20. You know, I have the benefit now of having a whole, report to see different incidents that happened throughout a different period of time. A lot of what I see, I guess, to Steve's point, it substantiated a lot of that so-called 18B team that had happened for generations. Maybe, in hindsight, when I went for the first colonel with, and chose Colonel Palumbo, maybe I should have gone outside at that point in time. But even then, I was a little bit constrained by some of our rules and regulations on the personnel side from that. Since then, we cleared those hurdles, made those changes, so that we were allowed to go outside for the colonel's position.
What are you
In
doing
hindsight,
next?
do you regret,
Oh, go ahead, Bob.
in hindsight, do you regret allowing Colonel Palumbo to retire when he did amid this investigation and knowing what you know now?
I think, having Colonel Palumbo move on was, at that time was the right thing to do.
Are you shocked by anything you learned in this report? Is there anything contained there you're like, oh?
I think overall, from the entire report itself, I now have the benefit of looking at everything all in one space. It kind of confirms some of the things that I started to see when I asked the state police, to come in and do that assessment. Like, give me an idea what's going on. And if there was that, fear from some of the officers that I was, that close and they were afraid to come talk to me, it shouldn't be an environment like that.
Mayor, during your many interactions with Steve Antonucci, and by the way, how long have you known Steve Antonucci?
Since I was probably on the council.
Okay. And you knew him as a police officer and a
Police officer.
labor union leader?
And the
or-
union leader, correct.
Okay. During your interactions with Steve Antonucci after Ticketgate cropped
Mhm.
up, did he remind you at any time that in his mind you had a political debt to him?
No. Nope.
He never brought it, never
Nope.
broached it?
Nope.
Even though the state police report suggests that there was support for you forthcoming for your initial election to mayor?
Nope. Anyone else? Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.